Nintendo Switch Online has been the target of a lot of criticism since the day the Nintendo Switch dropped, or even slightly before it came out. And I feel like as time goes on, for those that are vehemently against it, the criticisms lobbed at Switch Online have only gotten worse. I personally don't mind it all that much in its current form, but I do think there's plenty of room to grow and expand for something more. Luckily enough, for all of us, that expansion could be on the horizon if the new additional focus the Nintendo Switch Online service gets in the 11.0 Switch system update by it being added to the Switch UI is indicative of anything. I have a feeling it will be for a few key reasons. Let's talk about it. I think the best way to predict what Nintendo might do next is, well, most obviously at this point, to not pay so much attention to what other companies are doing, and almost even more than that, things Nintendo themselves have done in the past. Rather, people should be paying closer attention to what is actively being done in the present in tandem with how Nintendo talks about those things to get a better idea of what they may do next. For instance, if you listen to Nintendo's messaging during their financial briefings or interviews, Nintendo Switch Online to them is very clearly not about the online play aspect, almost at all. That said, the almost side of this distinction does mean that I think that there's a real possibility that we will see Nintendo attempt to make improvements to the online gaming side of the experience. My reasoning for that is that Nintendo currently, and to be fair, pretty much always has been advertising it as one of the focuses for Nintendo Switch Online, and we know that to still be the case because it's at the top of the sidebar menu for the Switch Online app on the console. So the fun part, what can or should they do to justify adding the home menu app in the context of this feature? First and foremost, the obvious thing to say here is this should be a hub to see not only what games support online play via Switch Online, but even more specific than that, it should keep the list to games you own and maybe games they think you'll like based on your eShop purchases and wish list. Not only that, it should display the games all of your friends are playing, and that is because this portion of the app should also expand to include the option to join and invite these friends to the games that support it. And dare I say again, after mentioning this in my video from last week, parties should be included here with all the typical party stuff that you'll find on pretty much any other gaming platform. I also think for the Parkers of the world, this could be a place for all sorts of leaderboard stats for people on your friends list. This could allow you to compare playtime, individual time to beat records, their amount of times opening each game, you know, activity log stuff, as well as, assuming they also include suggestions from the last video on this topic, My Nintendo reward and or achievement specific stats as well. Now, a lot of this stuff are things that I don't particularly see Nintendo doing. Like I said before, they don't seem to specifically care all that much for online play. But that attitude is largely informed by how much they traditionally value the local multiplayer experience, which has been almost entirely upended for most people due to our current circumstances. This won't be enough to change their view, but I do think it will be enough for them to at least adjust their view. That said, just to address what I'm sure many are thinking, no, making games better optimized for online play isn't a Switch Online problem. It's a game-by-game problem that can only be fixed by individual game development teams. Nintendo Switch Online isn't a hosting client. It facilitates certain features to be sure, but it's not what is making anyone's online play laggy or anything like that. Hence why Super Mario Maker 2 plays like a slideshow, but games like Splatoon 2 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe are very solid online. The classic games library is by far Nintendo's most valued part of this package, given everything we've seen and heard, and honestly, it's the place they're best suited to improve and could even stand to use expanding it as potential justification for hiking up the Switch Online service price for renewal. A lot of the related improvements are either self-explanatory, like a bigger pool of console libraries to pull from for games to add, or things that I recently talked about in my Nintendo Switch Game Pass equivalent video video that you should check out. But Parker has some additional thoughts from the perspective of someone who, like, barely cares about online play at all.
A lot of times, services like Nintendo Switch Online will use features that aren't their core purpose to more or less Trojan horse users in, who may otherwise never really bite the bullet. And as someone who doesn't really play online games barely at all, other than visiting my wife's island in Animal Crossing because sometimes the local wireless connection kicks us off and is a nuisance, there's two ways that I'd like to see Nintendo expand what they offer in the game quadrant of Nintendo Switch Online. This would be a great platform to follow in especially Microsoft's footsteps, not only with their games with Gold model, which PlayStation has with PlayStation Plus as well, but with Game Pass. We've said it in several videos before, but it seems like Nintendo does want to work with Microsoft, but not quite to the degree of allowing the full Xbox ecosystem of Game Pass and xCloud on the console. But after Nintendo continued testing the cloud market with Control and will be doing so with Hitman 3 soon, I'd be interested in a Nintendo Switch Online Pro membership that either forgoes cloud completely and just has a couple free games a month, even if they're sometimes bad, or just has a mini Game Pass of their own through the cloud perhaps. I'm sure it's not going to be as robust a library as all of that, but it could also stand to be pretty cheap, following in the footsteps of Nintendo Switch Online as it is. And just like the classic library in Tetris 99 and so on, this is a service that you have access to while you pay for it, then don't as soon as you drop the membership. And speaking of Tetris 99 and Super Mario 35, I'd also like to see more new games fashioned for Switch Online, and we've got a whole video about that you can watch in the link above. But the second part, as you may have gathered, I am perfectly fine being subject to Trojan horsing and would much appreciate more of it. So far, this has been the case with NES games, which is how I played all-time classics like Super Mario 3, Metroid, The Legend of Zelda for the first time, as well as Super Mario Bros. 2. And did you know that game used to be... Anyway, they also provided SNES games, which have had a much slower post-launch release actually, but are inarguably better games than their NES counterparts. But this is the kind of service that I'd like to see and frankly expect to see expanded upon. It's been long enough now that I'm surprised we haven't seen N64 or Game Boy or Game Boy Color games yet, although those weren't promised from the get-go like SNES and NES. Before the online, N64 is where multiplayer really hit its stride and is absolutely one of the strong points of what was my first home console. If we get N64 games, they need to come with the online multiplayer baked in, just like the NES and SNES games do. Imagine playing Pokemon Stadium mini games or Diddy Kong Racing or Mario Party 2 with your friends across the country. I would have thought the time had come already, but now I'm anxiously looking forward to, I don't know, March 31st with bated breath, hoping that that's finally our chance.
To continue on the topic of the Switch Online games library, I also think this new app addition to the UI is a great excuse to include a Smash Bros. Masterpiece-like feature to the app. They already make it part of the way there with the inclusion of descriptions in the chronological listing of each game's release. An easy way to take it the rest of the way there would be to add trailers and all of the other information they add to modern day game listings. I also think it'd be smart of them to completely close that loop on this Nintendo gaming history lesson and include baked-in hooks to other entries in each given franchise that's available on Switch one way or another, and list what platforms they're available on outside of those as well. Maybe include trivia on the franchise's development, characters in the franchise, the whole nine. Think what Smash Bros. Trophies used to be and expand it just a tad. Hell, they could even go full circle and make these trophies analogous to Sony's trophies if they wanted. Achieve a certain task in a game, unlock a Smash Bros. Like trophy with info on that character or other asset from the game a given trophy hails from. It's not exactly a must-have feature, but fans of gaming history, including myself, would certainly appreciate it. The cloud save segment of this new app isn't really something I think should or really even can be improved upon. And I don't know, correct me if you feel I'm wrong on this. I just feel like cloud saves are a pretty straightforward feature that they already got right. The only thing to improve is the amount of games that don't support it. Maybe by limiting the amount of times they can be backed up in a given amount of time, which obviously would have to be tracked by some means outside of the system clock, since that can easily be tampered with, assuming cheating is the limiting factor in regards to the games they decide to not include for cloud save. I will say I do have a few ideas that honestly I don't think are realistic for any company, let alone Nintendo, but here they are anyway for fun. One would be to to give more information on each given save, like a screenshot from the last save state for each game, and then, maybe less likely than even that, the option to save more than one file to the cloud as well, although that would almost certainly need some sort of anti-cheat measures beyond the time limit I suggested before. The special offers section is also pretty self-explanatory. Improving this would literally just require Nintendo to add more offers, and even those are pretty straightforward, like for the new libraries of games, obviously add the respective controllers, add game trials for games that are relatively popular but not overly abundant, stuff like that. I think Nintendo could embrace their love of limited releases by offering Nintendo Switch Online subscribers offers for limited merch related to recent or upcoming game releases, and similarly to that, I think these offers should be combined with My Nintendo in the sense that they could also list My Nintendo digital and physical items here as well. And those are our thoughts on everything Nintendo could, should, and maybe would include to the Nintendo Switch Online service following its newly minted primetime spot on the Nintendo Switch home screen's UI. What features do you think they can add to the Nintendo Switch Online app on the console, outside of literally just moving the mobile app, because who knows how likely that is. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider clicking the subscribe button and ringing the bell for new videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Also, we have a podcast which you can check out by clicking the link in the description or searching directly to you on any of the podcast services that you know of. Okay, that's it for me. See you on Thursday.